Hey, hi! Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, TIFF Senior International Programmer for Canada, and this is The Other Thing I Do. My guest this week is Tilman Singer, a writer and director who broke out with the ingenious horror film Luz in 2018 and now returns with Cuckoo, a similarly nightmarish thriller starring Hunter Schafer as Gretchen, a teenager who comes to live with her father and his new family in Germany, where he's been hired to renovate a hotel in the mountains, only to find herself trapped in the machinations of their employer, who has some very strange ideas about pretty much everything. It opens across North America this Friday, and you should see it. Tilman picked Lost Highway, David Lynch's 1997 neo-noir nightmare starring Bill Pullman as Fred Madison, an LA musician whose comfortable life becomes an abyss of surrealism and horror once he starts receiving cryptic messages and mysterious videotapes. There's a lot more to it, obviously, and if you haven't seen the film, which also features unforgettable work from Patricia Arquette as Fred's wife Renee, and a few sequences that are among the finest of Lynch's long career, I would suggest you pause this episode and go watch it right now, because it's impossible to discuss Lost Highway without engaging with it on every level, plot included. Oh, and one other thing. Our internet connection wasn't the best, and Tilman had a couple of dropouts during our conversation. I've cleaned it up, but think of it as another layer of mystery. This is Someone Else's Movie.
Long story short, because I love this movie and the movie is very meaningful to me. Then also I read the email maybe the day before yesterday, and I had quite a bunch of stuff until now. So I was thinking like, all right, what movie does not require homework? And maybe it's a movie that perhaps you haven't talked about yet. I don't know. So I thought of Lost Highway. I still watched it today, actually. I had a little time. So I rewatched at least until the midpoint or something. But I don't know. It's a movie, and I don't really have a favorite movie. I don't really understand the concept, but it must be one of my favorite movies. And I think why that is because I think I watched it the first time when I was 13 or 14. I don't remember that evening. We had a video night at my friend Teresa's, and she made us watch this weird movie that she found, and we had no idea who David Lynch was. I just had no idea. It was one of those very special moments where you watch something that is told in a way that you've never experienced before, that doesn't make sense in a way that other things make sense. And it just cracked open my skull. It just made me receptive to all kinds of things. It made me feel in a way that I hadn't felt before, that no piece of art had made me feel before. So it's always this, when I look back, it's always this very important moment for me watching that movie at that age.
Well, and yeah, being 13, it's going to imprint itself on you. There's a grand tradition of people seeing pivotal, transformative films before they're old enough to fully understand them.
Oh yeah,
and
this is super important.
Exactly, it lets you connect on a level that's almost pure. You're not necessarily catching nuances in the dialogue or things like that, but you experience it. Mine is always that I'm pretty sure my parents disagreed on how old I was, but based on the re-release pattern, I'm pretty sure I saw 2001 when I was either 4 or 5.
Wow.
And I felt like I got it.
Yeah, sure.
Because there's almost like the dialogue is irrelevant and the images are what matter, and the narrative and the structure flows. And so I that's my talisman. I just keep going back to it here and there. But the Lost Highway is almost as radical in its narrative grammar, I think, right? Because it does work on an intuitive level and doesn't ever explain. I mean, there is an explanation if you come at it from a certain direction, and there are sort of breadcrumbs in the film, but it doesn't matter. What's happening is happening, and we're trapped with it. And so if you're not trying to solve it because you're young enough that you're just experiencing it, then of course, it would hit you like a sledgehammer.
Yeah, and it also is extremely satisfying, I think, the movie. I didn't feel like I was missing anything. I mean, obviously I was, it's just, didn't made, I don't know, you couldn't just explain what happened or retell it after the movie, but I felt it made sense. It made sense. It had that exact same of satisfaction, even more so than other movies I've watched before. So, um, I don't even know if I was too young. It was just the first one sort of that I watched. But I'm with you. Like I have another movie I watched around that time. It's called Repo Man from
Oh,
the
sure.
early '80s. It's an Alex Cox movie. My uncle gave that to me on VHS, and I watched that over and over again. It was a copy. Was definitely original version. I don't even know if there's a dubbed version out there actually, but my English wasn't that good at the time, so I understood. I didn't understand everything, and but I just watched it over and over. And I was also too young for that, but I already loved punk music, and sort of it all worked out really well, for me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
God, I mean, the labeling joke would work even if you can't understand the words, right? That everything just looks the
that's true.
same.
That's true.
The thing that I wanted to ask you, which I find
Yeah.
absolutely fascinating, is if you know about the idea that Lost Highway was allegedly inspired by the O.J. Simpson murder case, which makes no
Um,
sense to me, but also a lot of sense.
it makes a lot of sense to me. I'm not super duper knowledgeable in the OJ murder case, but I think I know the main facts about it, and I think it makes absolutely sense to me. There is there is a form of haunting going on in the Lost Highway movie, isn't there?
Mm.
Like being haunted by visions or videotapes, a certain form of aggression, and that aggression then gets shared over multiple male characters who all have something to do with each other, and they sort of live on the same timeline, but also not, and they replace each other. So I don't know. In some way, they are connected, and in some way, they are one thing, right? And um, the the car chase motif, the killing your wife motif, the sexual frustration, the yeah, like sexual aggression, that all fits very well to
Yeah,
the OJ story, doesn't it?
it does.
Who
Lynch
said
said
that?
it was Lynch. He said
It-
that
oh,
he was
oh, all right.
fascinated by the he said he was fascinated by the idea of OJ living his life after the trial, which doesn't make a lot of sense because the trial didn't end until I think 1996, and the film came out immediately. But maybe he started
Mm,
working on it with the idea that if he gets off, what's it going to be like? It's about it is about people who are haunted by guilt. But the thing that always seemed odd to me is that
you
OJ
think it's
Sim-
guilt? I'm
well,
sorry, I didn't want to
well,
interrupt.
I think his idea was, what would it be like to be stalked by the knowledge? And
Yeah. Oh
so
yeah.
I think the actors are playing guilt because they're empathetic and they want to play guilt, but the real
Uh,
OJ and Lynch don't think about that, right?
no, I think Lynch is sort of like a certain darkness, violence that sort of lives in these characters, that haunts them, that comes for them. I think it feels to me more like that.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Like that's clearly the
Yeah.
point of it. But I think the actors, especially Pullman, who apparently by all reports is just the nicest person and thinks about these things,
Right.
he's haunting himself in a way,
Mm,
and because that's
mm,
what's on the page, he's playing it emotionally. But it
mm.
results in this weird disconnect in the film, which is what I think makes the film so effective, because the
Yeah.
movie has a different point of view of the characters than the characters themselves do. And so you're
Mm.
confronted with this abyss between intention and execution and depiction. And for me, it all comes together in the moment where Pullman just walks into darkness in a shadow.
Hmm. Yeah.
And which
Yeah.
is the most, I think, the single most disturbing and frightening image that Lynch has ever
Yeah.
created. And that's really saying something.
Yeah. I remember that moment from the first time I watched this movie.
Me too.
And yeah, that was a phase in my life. I don't, and by the way, I'm not really sure if it was like 13, 14, 15. So it's around that time, but I was so into horror movies at that time. But me and my friends, we had this tradition going on of going to the video store, because back then there were video stores. We would smoke a lot of weed, go to the video store, and pick out the shittiest, most violent movie we could find. Like, it had to be extremely campy, like, and more like weird, violent, horrific we could find. That would have been it for the evening. So I've seen a lot of things, and also quite disturbing things, but nothing got me so good than him with that sound design, this sort of almost like a horror vacuum. I don't know what it is, going in the darkness and then sort of looking at himself and coming back out, right? It's so disturbing. It
Yeah.
works so well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so simple, right? Visually, you're sort of waiting for a jump scare that never comes, and the sound, the sound is oppressive. My first screening was in a tiny screening room in a long gone building in Toronto that used to be the TIFF Cinematheque, actually, weirdly enough.
Okay.
I remember the angle that I watched that film from. That's how vividly that room is in my memory.
Right.
And it wasn't the best sound system, and it made it worse. Like, it made it more upsetting because your brain is straining to listen to what's happening, and it wasn't clear. And then I've watched it subsequently, and now there's a 4K with the new Dolby remastered track, and it's deliberately unclear, but it was so much more so in a scratchy optical mono track, and it was just I will never forget that sensation of just, I don't want to be here. There is something wrong in this moment. And other directors can do that here and there, but with Lynch, like, his entire aesthetic is about sharpening that feeling to a point and just leaving you there. And and without Pullman too, like, moving so slowly and deliberately, it's not just him, it's a collaboration, it's direction, but what Peter Denman does visually, it's everyone imitates it now, but at the time it was unique.
Well, I don't even know if everybody's still imitating it still, but I agree. I think it's maybe one of the most beautiful movies I know, and I think it all comes together, and it's not just because of beautiful cinematography, but all of it. And I wanted to say that when the first things they say to each other in the movie, I think the first lines is that what's his name, Dick Laurent is dead, but the first thing they talk to each other is something like, "I'm not going to come out to the club. What are you going to do? I'll stay at home and read." And the way Bill Pullman goes to her, to Patricia Arquette, and says, "Read what?" And it's immediately so uncomfortable and disturbing, but so appealing. You want to see what's happening with that spooky couple, and I don't even know what I was expecting when I watched it for the first time. But again, with that it was felt so satisfying, is that him going in the darkness, that felt so meaningful, because Lynch made that point by pacing, by tempo, by what he shows to us, and how people talk to each other, and that everything is a little off, but believable enough that we stay with them. And at that time, I didn't need it to have a monster coming out of the dark or some spectacle. At that time, it was sort of that low point of being uncomfortable, but it like mesmerized by what was going on. It's incredible.
Yeah. And it's not the only set piece in the film. I mean, there's the scene with the mystery man, there's the confrontation at the end, there's the chases, but it is the simplest way of telling us what's happening without telling us what's happening. And although there is a pivot in the film, there's the sort of the Texas switch where the actors change places and somebody else is taking over, and that's a bit that's been reused a few times, and every time you could just tell. When I see someone do that now, it's just like, you better have a better reason than "I liked this in Lost Highway," because it's so instantly identifiable.
Yeah.
That sense of disquiet never goes away. The sense of, unease never goes away. I mean, the film, like, there's different musical cues and there's all sorts of stylistic changes that Lynch pulls, but the tone of this thing is so oppressive that it never really lets go. And I think that's what he wanted. That was his idea of haunted by knowledge and people pursuing themselves with the sense that you've done something unforgivable and irrevocable and you'll never be free of it.
Yeah. It's interesting to me that I don't know why, but my perception of it also changed over time. The things are obviously like when you're a young teenager, other things are differently striking to you than they are when you're an adult, and so much I didn't get. What now is extremely apparent to me. So much, especially in terms of their relationship. Like it, he couldn't be more clearer. But I didn't get all of that when I was that young. But I also have this deep joy watching the movie. And I think it's because of David Lynch's balance, of having something extremely comedic and light and something extremely oppressive and dark. And you have this, it changes between the two. And maybe it's because I find it so incredibly well made and beautiful and meaningful. But I experience deep joy when I watch that movie. It's not that I watch it and I turn it on and say like, all right, I want to feel shitty again. Let's watch this movie. No, I got deep fundamental joy out of it by watching something that brings me to a very dark place in my own psyche. And that is, I think, what I love about, his work in that movie. I think that's what's so appealing in horror in general, but yeah.
Hey, it's Norm interrupting my own show to bring you up to speed on Shiny Things, my newsletter about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming project. Over the last couple of weeks, I wrote about the new releases of The Fall Guy, I Saw the TV Glow, Civil War, and Boy Kills World, as well as new catalog editions of Farewell My Concubine, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., Redline 7000, and the Nico Mastorakis collection. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io or find a link at the Semcast Blue Sky account. You like reading about movies? I like writing about them. Come check it out. It's the catharsis, right? We get to experience a catharsis even if the characters don't. And I think that's always been the power of horror as well, to be able to escape, right? To be able to escape into this story and vicariously experience whatever it is that the story has to show us, and then escape again and back into the world unharmed. I mean, you've been in an alpha state for 95 minutes or however long, and you come back and you're probably no different. Maybe you've picked up something philosophical or some kind of aesthetic appreciation, but other than nightmares, for the most part, we can walk away from horror films feeling like we enjoyed ourselves. It's a thing about art that I've never been able to reconcile, because I also grew up on the most spectacular. I mean, I was a teenager in the 80s when the video nasty wave was happening in the UK, and we had Fangoria here to tell us what the big scary ones were. And I gorged on them. So Lynch was a gateway drug for me too, with Eraserhead more than anything. But
wow.
Yeah, it's and then of course you look back and realize that 30, 40 years later, most of those horror filmmakers are now craftsmen, and most of them are very old now, but the ones that come from horror, people like Craven and Raimi and Carpenter and Cronenberg, they're artists in a different way. It just takes a while for the culture to catch up to them and venerate them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, horror films, you get a catharsis from it and you're in a safe place. I think it's always that, whatever a thing in a horror film, whatever some metaphor means, sometimes you cannot really put them into words, and sometimes they don't just stand for one clear thing. But it definitely is this safe way of looking at something, acknowledging something within you, some fear, in a safe, fun way, or in a way where you can yourself decide by how closely you want to look at it. Do you just want to see the horror spectacle and the fun thriller, or do you open up a little more? And when you watch, I don't know, Lost Highway, and you open up about internally, you introspect your own aggression or whatever it is, the movie may or may not point out for you. I think, that's that's the main thing for me to watch so-called scary movies.
Yeah. I think the fascinating thing to me about Lost Highway, and actually most of Lynch's cinema, really, when I think about it, Blue Velvet is about the same thing. Mulholland Drive, even The Elephant Man, they're all about the terror of being seen for who you are and what you are. He never really articulates it, and the films can maybe even make a case to deny that. But the two most effective moments in Lost Highway are the mystery man saying, I'm there right now, and explaining the concept of I think is it the Bardo that he talks about specifically, the philosophy that we will be caught in a loop of misery and punishment until we take responsibility for ourselves, which seems to me to be the thesis statement of the film.
Later in the desert. Yeah, that's not the same scene as him giving him the phone, right? But
yeah, the phone's at the party.
Yeah. No, you're right.
Yeah, and the other scene is simply Arquette just staring at Getty and saying, "You'll never have me." With this perfect. It's like she's slitting his throat without a single physical movement. Her poise and her resolve, and the fact that she's looking through him. It's just, again, it's something that stayed with me for 35 or 6 or however many years it's been. And it's cathartic for me. It's not cathartic for that guy. He's not going to learn anything. And the film ends with him still trying to outrun whatever it is that's coming.
Or morphing into something. We don't know. They cut away. You have this. He's shaking again, and he's smoking. Like his body is smoking, I think. Yeah.
I think he's trying to come up with the next way to escape, the next incarnation, the next identity, because it's a reverse Vertigo too. That's the other really fun thing.
Sure. Oh.
I mean, he's playing on that with the dual role for Arquette, but also I think we're watching someone keep trying to outrun guilt the way Maddie Pryor did.
Right.
Not Pryor. Yeah. What's her name? I got that name wrong. But yeah. It's
Pryor, but Maddie's correct. Yeah.
Madeline, Maddie Pryor is from the X-Men.
Maddie,
but yeah, it's definitely something that is on the film's mind. The idea of guilt and refusing to connect to it and assuming a new identity to just move on, but no one moves on.
That's so interesting. It's very interesting to me. It makes absolute sense to me what you're saying. I never thought about it as about guilt, but it's in there. You could call it guilt. I don't know what's the word is I would put for it, but this, I don't know. I feel like it speaks about some raw, horrific, like, I don't know, I don't want to use the wrong word. It's cumbersome to put it into words, but some human, and it may be also some very male, raw, violent, natural state, almost like everybody's eating everybody else, and that sexual frustration that Bill Pullman has from the very first scene up until the point where she tells him, "You will never have me," that speaks to something that is quite disgusting. And at least for me, looking at that and how I may have that, in me being a man and my brain sometimes reverting back to caveman brain or whatever it is, I think this is sort of this haunting that I sense in that movie. But yeah, the guilt aspect, definitely part of it. Yeah, it's interesting.
Or the avoidance of guilt, because that's the other thing that I keep thinking about, that the masculine impulse in this film specifically, I think, is that nothing is his fault. That he didn't do anything. He doesn't remember. He can't tell.
Right.
He won't acknowledge. Right. And that is a very very male impulse, right? When you're confronted with responsibility, the first thing you do is deny it, and then you try to ameliorate it or negotiate it. And here, this guy just runs. He's and Lynch plays with perspective just enough too, so that we can doubt it for a little while. Even when the guy falls into a coffee table, that's an accident, right? Like he didn't mean it.
Right. Yeah.
But what if?
Yeah.
Yeah. But what if?
Theoretically, it's an accident.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But by that point, we also know what the stakes are, and what's really happening. I think is that you're just watching someone violently reject the suggestion that he is violent, which is this other feedback loop that happens in the film that I find utterly mesmerizing when I revisit it, because that's something we're really only dealing with as a culture now, and this is decades ago that Lynch was on it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was early for a lot of things. And thank God he didn't put it explicitly in preachy, terms, because it wouldn't have lasted that long if everybody was like, oh, yep, that's the lesson. I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it's what Blue Velvet is about too, acknowledging the darkness that we all have inside of us. And in that film, it was a more deliberately psychosexual thing where everybody's, under the safe image of suburbia, everybody's just a seething old weirdo, but people come out the other end and it's redemptive. There's no redemption here. This is just a descent.
Yeah. Yeah. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate that feeling that I have from it. It doesn't, I don't know how to describe it. It doesn't feel like, again, it feels cathartic. It doesn't feel like a descent to me. Even though I watch a descent, it feels like I'm personally getting out of it while watching it happen. And a lot of horror films, and I appreciate if they do it well, is this sort of spiraling down into darkness, into absolute doom. And then sort of the uplift comes when you leave the cinema, right? But or here, I don't know, my feeling goes the other way. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. I mean, on one level, we're just glad it's not us. I mean, you have the textbook, this guy, I'm better than him, at least. This guy's not me.
Right.
But,
right.
Yeah. But I keep coming back to how sympathetic Pullman usually is and how brilliantly that casting works. It's a year after Independence Day. People came to see this movie because the president from Independence Day is in it.
It's 1 year after. I wasn't. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I could have looked that up, but I wasn't aware. Sure, I know these movies happened around the same time, but that's kind of funny.
Oh yeah.
that's well. It came out 1 year after.
Yeah, 1997.
So okay. Then I think there must have been like shooting while they were editing Independence Day. It would have been a genius move if Independence Day was out and Lynch went like, "Oh, let's get the president.
Here's your hero." Yeah, it's so unique. It's such a strange moment where Lynch also, coming off of Twin Peaks, I think was hotter than he'd ever been in terms of Hollywood. He could make a film like this about Los Angeles culture and then double down on it with Mulholland Drive, which of course was a television pilot, so that was hugely funded by ABC. And just get anybody he wanted. Richard Pryor is in this movie. It's I can't explain.
5 seconds.
Yeah.
5 wonderful seconds, but yeah.
Richard Pryor, we haven't seen him in a while because he was already sick and he'd been stepping back from work. But the fact that Lynch could get him and give him a role like that with so much compassion and warmth for those tiny appearances, that speaks volumes about, I think, who David Lynch is too, because there's no irony there. There's no joke. He's not mocking Hollywood culture or Richard Pryor in any way. He's just like, I have this great actor who can do this scene, and it just happens to be somebody who no one thinks of as this person.
Yeah. There's no ironical detachment from it. There's acknowledgement. The movie itself acknowledges itself every now and then, how weird it is, which I think is very beautiful and healthy. But there's never this no, don't take this too serious. I'm just making, this is irony or something, which I personally really don't like. It's very popular right now again. there's a place for it, but if everybody just distances themselves from their work, then I don't know, it doesn't mean anything. Then, like, why should I take you serious if you don't really feel for what you're putting out? And he never did that, and I admire that very much.
That actually lets me transition into your own work, because I was about to say, like in something like Luz, when two people are arguing in a police station with the fate of the world at stake, you make sure we feel that, right? Like it's not a joke that any of this is happening. You're watching someone go from unbelief to belief, but it's not ever funny in that way. We're never asked to laugh at the situation. And there are things in Cuckoo that could have also been played for laughs that simply are not. Just the fact that it does, I mean, there's that early, it's sort of a car chase, that early moment at the beginning with the bicycle where something truly horrible is coming up to us. And that the timing and the beats of the suspense aspects of it and the cuts, it could be funny, right? Like there is a way to play that exact moment, those exact shots. And you just aren't interested in that, which I thought was so great. Right away, like 25 minutes in, you're just telling us what kind of movie this is.
Well, there's funny and there's funny. I mean, I guess it's sort of like how you present it, because I really like it to mix flavors. I really, really like mixing flavors. I like mixing humor with something sad or something tense, because then like new things happen that that feel like they're more, I don't know, sometimes they feel like they're more truthful, even they're not realistic, but they feel like how life feels like, which I usually find myself, when I find myself in really sad or even like traumatic situations, there's always something that I find funny about them. Always. And it's not like slap your knee, ha ha, funny, but it has a certain humor. And I don't know, when I write stories, I can never help but see the ridiculousness of what I write, what the concrete thing I write, and they might be absolutely ridiculous, but they still feel like very meaningful and honest, and I feel strongly for them. But it's good, it's fine, because it's okay that it's at the same time ridiculous, and there's some and it actually be also being very serious at the same time. Sometimes people don't understand what also when I talk to people, they think I'm joking around just because I don't know, make little jokes here and there while saying something utterly serious, but I don't know, it's just my way, I think.
That's interesting. I mean, the way I see Cuckoo, it's that you can cast Dan Stevens in that role and get that performance and still have him be formidable. Like he is goofy in his way because the character is laughing at the characters and he's laughing at everyone else. But Stevens plays the reality of that, which is this kind of smugness and superiority and confidence. And yet I think about, and this isn't a spoiler, thankfully it's just one tiny scene early on, but I think about how flustered he gets when Beatrice calls him out on sticking her with the night shifts. And he has this little tiny prissy argument with her off in the corner of a shot. And it's just like, oh, that's okay. He's a freak, but he actually is concerned about the budgets and things. And that's kind of wonderful.
I agree. That was very important, actually, to me to, I thought about hiding the nature of his character a little bit, which I didn't do. I feel like he's showing up in the movie, and you immediately know the way we frame him and how he emerges sort of in the reflection of a window as sort of a dark shadow. And all these things tell you immediately, like, okay, watch out for this guy, which I think was important for this movie, because I felt like the energies from the character should flow strongly and should be very, very detectable. And then it can be interesting to see how it actually plays out, because I think we try to give everybody, we try to ground every character in a way, give everybody a motivation that you can understand sort of what they're, why they're doing what they're doing. And for then Herr König, then Steven's character, it was very important that he gets into these like little petty arguments with somebody like below him, like this young woman that works at the reception of the hotel he's owning while he's building a second one. And he's very rich and very powerful, but he still gets into the like nitty gritty. And there's a like, little beautiful humor in that, you know, that I really like, even though the movie just slowly gets tenser or more mysterious, but you break it with these little things that feel more real if you do that for some reason, you know?
Oh, absolutely. And the movie is grounded in human concerns, you know, family, identity, ownership of one's own body, let's say, and all sorts of other stuff that I do not want to discuss for fear that people will hear it and think some, not even spoilers, but just to think about what sort of film it is, because that's very playful as well. I mean, are you making a movie about teenage alienation, or are you making a movie about a teenager who's the only person who sees what's going on around her, and that alienates her? I mean, it's the device of that is a really interesting back and forth. And that feels very Lynchian too, right? Because you're dealing with somebody who is seeing things that are real, that speak volumes about the culture that she finds herself in and the people around her. And she's the outsider because she's not part of the box. She's not part of the plan.
Yeah, the two things you just said, is it a movie about alienation or a movie about seeing what nobody else can? I ask myself all these questions one way or the other while working on it. And I never have a definitive answer for me. I have a certain meaning for most things, a very, very concrete meaning, what it means, what it builds on top of, because it always builds on real world things for me that are sort of like the columns, the emotional story for me is built upon. But that's only my thing, you know, that's only my approach to the story. It's sort of in a weird way, maybe, that if I had made this movie, then I would be probably reminded of that, right? And that would be my, I don't know, meaning, my interpretation of it. But it's but I don't think it's important what it is, and I don't think anybody should know, right? Because then I rob somebody else of their meaning, of their secret, you know, with the movie. I find it immensely important that happens. I don't. That's the power of art. That it's a concrete thing that reminds me of something, that gets me going, that gets my brain going. But I'm kind of doing the work. I'm kind of making in my brain another piece of art. It grows out, right? It grows into my head, and then in my head something exists. And when a piece of art is too concrete or preachy or tells you what to feel, what the takeaway, that thing doesn't happen. Then you're just seeing something like, all right, I understand. Great. You know?
No, the thing I love about movies is it really is the only art form, I think, full stop, where 500 people will sit in a room in silence together, see the same thing and hear the same thing, and each one of us can potentially come out with a completely different interpretation or have a different experience. And when that doesn't happen, it's not as good. Like if it's an Avengers movie, you'll cheer maybe at different points or something like that. But we're getting the Happy Meal we ordered. McDonald's makes the same thing all over the world, so you know what you're getting and all of that. But with Lynch, there's always that space. With your films, there's that room for space, and those are the things that I just respond to. I'm more excited to see what the next thing is going to be. So. Yeah, I know we're running out of time, but that was a really fun thing about Cuckoo, to just not know what the hell was happening until it started to reveal itself. And even then, there's room
Yeah.
for interpretation.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's important. Always leave room.
Yeah, absolutely. Or a great big dark space that people can walk into.
Or that, exactly.
That does sort of get me to the final question, which is, again, always the same on the podcast. And it's what, if anything, and I can't really think of it other than maybe thematically, but what, if anything, from Lost Highway have you borrowed or lifted or homaged or outright stolen in your own work? Is there something you can point to?
Um, That's a good question, and I'm getting very nervous because not because I stole this and that and this, but I just have so much respect, and I don't want to compare myself to it. But it is so meaningful to me and touched me so profoundly. This movie, other work of David Lynch, that I think um, I what I think what I learned from him is that everybody has their own stories within in them, and you should go after them. You should go after whatever happens within you, and what you feel strongly for, because that will lead you. I don't even know if he said that concretely at some point, but that's still my takeaway.
Mm.
And maybe it comes from the fact that he had this extremely unique way of telling a story. I mean, I understand what it builds upon. I know that when I watch a Fellini movie, I see the similarities, right? I see where he got some stuff, and it's very beautiful to see. But still, he taught me sort of that, you just do what you feel strongly for, and what you just said, you leave room. Um, I when before we shot the movie Cuckoo, I watched Lost Highway with Hunter Schafer. When we got to know each other, we I think we got the Blu-ray and we watched it together because she's never seen it. I was like, all right, this is one of my favorite movies, and I think it's a little bit, at least it's even though it's not a concrete inspiration, and I couldn't point to things sort of. I feel there's some relation to what we're doing. And we watched it together, and she really liked it. And at some point, she she said something. She said something like out of the blue. She said like, "Wow, you can write about anything." And I was like, "Yes, isn't that great? Isn't that fantastic to not know where this is going?" Sort of, and that you have this strong feeling, but you don't really, you're kind of disoriented, but you're emotionally, you're very clear, and it's this beautiful approach that you can only get, this feeling that you can only get while watching a movie like this, and going after a strong emotional narrative is something, I think, a main takeaway from this movie, from other of Lynch's movies. And then there are just so many shots that I'm not even aware of when I steal them. and then I rewatch the movie. I think for the movie Lose, I framed the mouth of Julia, the actress, at the beginning of the movie Lose, the same way that Patricia Arquette's mouth is framed. I think it even has like a similar pen or something. And I rewatched this and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's where I got it. Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a conscious thing, but it just happens. I'm one of these people that are not aware where they steal, even though I am aware that I'm stealing everything from somewhere. And then you put it together and it becomes something new. But yeah. Yeah.
Well, it works for you.
I hope it does, yeah.
My thanks to Tilman Singer, whose new film Cuckoo opens across North America this Friday, August 9th. Thanks also to Sarah Sparks. She knows what she did. Tilman doesn't appear to be on social media, but you can track Cuckoo on Instagram at Cuckoo Movie, all one word. And you can find Lost Highway on 4K, Blu-ray, and DVD from the Criterion Collection and streaming on the Criterion Channel. It's also available to rent or buy on various VOD services across North America. You can find me on Blue Sky at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast. SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payup.com/semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 44 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it, or this show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps, it truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get the new booster when you can. I'll see you next week.